Commander Dowan stood stiffly in the gleaming Hall of Judgment aboard the Galactic Hegemony vessel, Eternal Doctrine. His scales shimmered with stress, reflecting the harsh lights as 5 senior officers glared down at him from their raised platform. The chamber fell silent as the head judge spoke the final words of his sentence. For the crime of questioning the wisdom of the Supreme Council, for suggesting alternative methods to the resource extraction on planet 5591, and for sharing these treasonous thoughts with junior officers, you are hereby stripped of all rank and privilege. Dowan kept his 4 eyes fixed forward, refusing to show fear. Just last week he had been a respected commander, decorated for his service across 3 star systems. Now, because he dared speak about the suffering of the mining planet's native species, he was nothing. The Council has shown mercy, continued the judge, though no hint of kindness showed in his rigid face. Rather than public execution, you will be granted the dignity of solitude for your final reflection. 2 guards approached, their uniform insignias freshly polished, deliberately avoiding Dowan's gaze. These were officers who had served under him for years. Now they gripped his arms and led him down the corridor towards the ejection bays where escape pods were housed. "The pod has been prepared," one guard whispered so quietly that only Dowan could hear. "I'm sorry, Commander. The life pod was barely larger than a sleeping chamber. Its dull metal interior contained only the essentials: a hibernation seat, minimal life support systems, and a small water recycler. No food, no entertainment, no communication system beyond a basic distress beacon that would broadcast on an outdated frequency, one the hegemony had stopped monitoring decades ago." As the guards secured him into the seat, Dowan noticed the oxygen readout, calculated for 63 days, just long enough for him to contemplate his so-called crimes while slowly running out of air. Too short for rescue, too long for a quick death. The perfect cruelty disguised as compassion. "The Council hopes you find peace in your final days," said the senior guard formally, repeating the ritual words. The pod door sealed with a soft hiss. Through the small viewport, Dowan watched his former ship grow smaller. The ejection sequence had been gentle, another false kindness. No quick death from acceleration trauma, just the slow drift into nothingness between stars. For hours, Dowan stared at the unchanging blackness outside. The Eternal Doctrine had long since jumped to hyperspace, leaving no trace. He was truly alone now. In a section of space far from any charted routes or inhabited systems, the life support system hummed softly, counting down his remaining time. Dowan tried to control his breathing, knowing that every anxious gasp used precious oxygen. His people had evolved the ability to enter hibernation during their planet's harsh winter cycles. Perhaps he could extend his survival by cycling between consciousness and hibernation, though it would only delay the inevitable. As the cold reality of his situation settled in, Dowan activated the hibernation protocols. The temperature in the pod gradually lowered, and his 4-chambered heart slowed its beating. His last conscious thought before the first hibernation cycle began was not of anger or fear, but a strange sense of peace. At least he had spoken the truth. At least he had stood for something. The tiny pod continued its lonely journey through the endless dark, its outdated distress beacon sending out regular pulses into the void. Signals that, according to all hegemony calculations, would never be heard by anyone. What the hegemony could not calculate, however, was that beyond their carefully controlled boundaries, a young species had recently developed faster-than-light travel. A curious, persistent species with a habit of investigating even the faintest signals from deep space. A species that, unlike the hegemony, still believed in second chances. The cold woke Dowan first. His body trembled as his 4 eyes slowly opened, adjusting to the dim emergency lighting of the pod. This was his 5th awakening since being cast out. Each time the process grew harder, his body fighting against returning to consciousness. "Day 47, he croaked, his voice rough from disuse. According to the original calculations, he should have less than 3 weeks of oxygen remaining, yet the display showed 39 days. His hibernation was working better than expected, slowing his breathing to almost nothing during the deep sleep cycles. Dowan pressed his scaled hand against the small viewport. Nothing but endless black outside, occasionally dotted with distant stars. No planets, no ships. Nothing to mark the passing of time except the pod's basic chronometer. He allowed himself 15 minutes of movement, each awakening, just enough to prevent muscle deterioration. The pod was barely large enough for him to stretch his limbs, forcing him to exercise in sections. First arms, then torso, then legs. His once powerful body had grown thin, his scales losing their healthy shine. As he moved, memories flooded back. The bright halls of the academy where he'd trained. The pride in his family's eyes at his graduation. His first command assignment. And then the mining colony on planet 5591, where he'd witnessed the native beings, intelligent creatures with complex social structures, being treated as obstacles to be removed for resource extraction. He'd been raised on hegemony teachings. Expansion was necessary. Resources were meant to be used, and the strong naturally dominated the weak. But seeing those beings suffering had awakened something in him. He'd questioned the Council's methods in his reports, suggested alternatives, spoken to junior officers about his concerns, and for that he was here. Adrift, forgotten. The emergency beacon continued its steady pulse, sending signals on a frequency that had been standard during his grandfather's time. The hegemony had switched to more advanced communication systems decades ago, deliberately abandoning the old networks to isolate themselves from primitive species they deemed unworthy of contact. Dowan checked the water recycler. Still functioning, though the taste grew worse with each cycle. He allowed himself 2 small sips, saving the rest for later awakenings. "Computer status report," he said, following the same routine he'd established to maintain sanity. "Life support at 68% efficiency. Oxygen supply sufficient for 39 days at current consumption rates. Hull integrity 100%. Position unknown. No response to emergency beacon." The same report as last time. And the time before. Dowan had stopped hoping for rescue after the second awakening. No hegemony ship would find him here, even if they wanted to. His only company was the gentle hum of the life support system and occasional recordings of his own voice. Observations, memories, final thoughts for whoever might someday find his pod. "Beginning hibernation sequence," he announced to no one. The pod gradually cooled as his metabolism slowed. His heartbeat dropped from its already weakened rhythm to a bare minimum. As consciousness faded, Dowan found himself thinking about the stories his grandmother had told him as a child. Tales of the ancient days before the hegemony, when their people had looked to the stars with wonder rather than calculation. Tales of other beings who might exist out there, waiting to be discovered. Perhaps it was fitting that he would end his life contemplating the vastness between stars. The hegemony saw the universe as something to be conquered. In his final days, Dowan was beginning to see it as something far greater, a mystery no single species could ever fully understand or control. The hibernation took hold, and consciousness slipped away. The pod continued its silent journey through the void, carrying its lone passenger between periods of wakefulness and sleep. One small life, adrift in the immensity of space, while somewhere beyond the darkness, an unknown ship was about to change. "Everything, Captain, I'm picking up something strange." Communications Officer Pack looked up from his station on the bridge of the horizon, his brow furrowed in concentration. "It's faint, but definitely artificial." Captain Gina Kim set down her coffee mug and crossed the bridge in 3 quick steps. The Horizon had been mapping this uncharted region for 2 weeks now, documenting star positions and scanning for habitable planets. It was humanity's most distant expedition yet, a bold push into the unknown after just 15 years of faster-than-light travel capability. "Show me," she said, leaning over past shoulder. The signal appeared as a weak, pulsing line on his display. Regular intervals, clearly manufactured rather than a natural phenomenon. Gina felt a flutter of excitement in her chest. Their mission briefing had prepared them for the possibility of encountering evidence of other intelligent life. But after months in deep space, the crew had begun to doubt they'd find anything beyond interesting rock formations. "It's broadcasting on an unusual frequency," Pa explained. Nothing like our standard channels. I almost missed it completely. The bridge crew had gone quiet, everyone watching the exchange. These were Earth's finest, scientists, explorers, and military personnel selected from a global pool of candidates. Every one of them understood the potential significance of this moment. "Can you determine the source?" Gina asked. Lieutenant Minji, the navigation officer, was already plotting coordinates. "Signal origin approximately 500,000 kilometers from our position. It's not coming from a planet or any significant celestial body." "Put it on screen," Gina ordered. The main view screen switched to show a starfield. Minji magnified the area where the signal originated, but nothing was visible yet, just empty space. Tactical Officer Han cleared his throat. "Captain, I recommend caution. This could be a trap." "We have no idea what's out here." Han wasn't wrong. Earth's history was filled with stories about first contacts gone wrong. Fiction had shaped their expectations as much as scientific theory. But Gina hadn't become a starship captain by being overcautious. "Noted, Lieutenant," she replied. "But we're explorers first. That signal could be a distress call. I won't ignore it because we're scared of ghosts." She straightened her uniform. Jacket, still the classic blue of Earth's United Space Initiative, with the silver compass rose that symbolized humanity's expanding horizons. Helm, set an intercept course. Tactical, keep shields at standard strength. But weapons systems on Ein, standby only. She raised her voice to address the entire bridge. "Remember your training, people. First contact protocols are in effect from this moment forward." The Horizon adjusted course, its massive engines pushing the exploration vessel toward the mysterious signal. In the ship's laboratories, xenobiologists prepared for possible alien specimens. In medical, the doctors reviewed their universal translation software. Every department buzzed with controlled excitement. As they drew closer, the ship's sensors began picking up more details. "Captain, I'm detecting a small object," announced the sensor officer. "Approximately 3 meters in length, metal composition. It appears to be some kind of pod." The view screen zoomed in further, and there it was, a small craft drifting, alone in the vastness of space. Its design was unlike anything in Earth's archives, with smooth curves and an iridescent surface that reflected starlight in strange patterns. "Life signs?" Gina asked, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. A moment of silence as the scans completed. "One life form," came the reply. "Faint, but present. Biological readings don't match any known pattern." Gina took a deep breath. Humanity's first confirmed contact with an extraterrestrial intelligence wouldn't be with a mighty civilization or on some distant planet. Instead, it would be with a lone survivor in a drifting pod at the edge of nowhere. "Prepare the shuttle. Bay and Alert Medical, we're bringing our visitor aboard," she turned to her first officer. "History is watching us today. Let's show the universe what humanity stands for." As the Horizon carefully approached the alien pod, no one on board realized they were about to challenge the dominance of an empire that spanned hundreds of worlds, or that this single act of compassion would eventually reshape the politics of an entire sector of space. The bright lights of the medical bay made Darwin's scales shimmer as he lay unconscious on the examination table. The humans stood at a safe distance, their voices hushed with wonder and concern. This was the first alien being they had ever encountered, and no one was quite sure what to do next. Dr. Hayek leaned over the display panel, his dark eyes narrowed, in concentration. "His biological readings don't match anything in our database," he murmured, running a hand through his short hair. "Body temperature is far lower than ours, and I'm detecting 4 separate chambers in what appears to be a heart. His respiratory system is complex." Captain Gina paced at the edge of the room. "Can you help him?" "I'm trying," Dr. Hayek replied, "but it's like performing surgery on a creature from a fairy tale. Everything is different." The alien scales were a deep blue-green, arranged in overlapping patterns across a body that seemed both reptilian and mammalian. 4 eyes were closed beneath heavy lids, and his chest rose and fell in slow, shallow breaths. "The pod's life support was nearly exhausted," Lieutenant Minji reported, looking up from her tablet. "Another few days and..." She didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone in the room understood how close they'd come to finding nothing but a corpse drifting in space. Dr. Hayek carefully applied a small device to the alien's chest. I'm going to try warming his core temperature gradually. According to the pod's data logs, he was in some kind of hibernation state. If we can replicate the conditions for waking... Hours passed. The medical team worked tirelessly, using scanners and gentle tests to understand their patient's physiology without causing harm. They synthesized fluids based on samples from the pod's recycling system, hoping to provide hydration that wouldn't be toxic. I think he's waking up, Dr. Hayek said suddenly, stepping back as monitors began to show increased brain activity. All four of Dowen's eyes opened at once, darting around the room in obvious panic. His body tensed, scales flattening against his skin in what seemed like a defensive posture. A high-pitched sound escaped him. Whether a word or merely a cry of fear, the humans couldn't tell. Easy now, Dr. Hugh said, keeping his voice low, and calm despite knowing the alien couldn't understand him. He raised his empty hands, palms forward, in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. Captain Gina stepped slowly into Dowen's line of sight. You're safe, she said clearly. We found your pod. You're aboard the Earthship Horizon. Dowen pushed himself back against the examination table, his movements weak but frantic. His gaze fixed on the strange beings surrounding him, their pink skin, their round eyes, their alien features unlike anything in the hegemony's records. No scales, no proper coloration, no sign of proper social rank markings. What were these creatures? The human called Pack, who specialized in communications, approached with a small device. We've been working on this while you were unconscious, he explained, though Dowen couldn't understand. It's a basic translation matrix. It won't be perfect, but it might help. The device projected a series of simple images: water, food, rest, pain. Universal concepts that might bridge the gap between species. Dowen stared at the images, his panic gradually giving way to cautious curiosity. These beings could have killed him while he was unconscious, but instead they seemed to be trying to help. He slowly reached a trembling hand toward the image of water. Dr. Hayek nodded and carefully offered a container of clear liquid. We analyzed the water from your pod. This should be safe for you. Dowen sniffed the water suspiciously before taking a small sip. It tasted clean, better than the recycled liquid he'd been surviving on for weeks. He drank more eagerly. Over the next several days, a fragile trust began to build. The translation device grew more sophisticated, as Park fed it with language samples from both species. Dowen learned that these beings called themselves humans, and that they were explorers from a planet called Earth. Most shocking of all, they seemed to have no knowledge of the hegemony, the vast empire that had ruled Dowen's corner of the galaxy for generations. These humans came from a different direction entirely. Their technology developed along different paths. Why did you help me? Dowen asked through the translator one evening when he was strong enough to sit up. You know nothing about me. I could be dangerous. Captain Gina smiled. Because you needed help. That's reason enough. Such a simple answer. Such an alien concept to one raised in the calculating, merciless hierarchy of the hegemony. Dowen looked at these strange, soft-skinned beings with new understanding. Perhaps they were naive, or perhaps they had discovered something his people had long forgotten. You mean your leaders don't approve your missions? Dowen asked, his four eyes blinking in confusion as he sat across from Captain Gina in the ship's conference room. After 2 weeks aboard the Horizon, his strength had mostly returned, and the translation system now caught about 80% of their conversations correctly. Gina smiled, pushing a cup of sweetened tea toward their guest. They'd discovered Dowen had quite a sweet tooth. Our mission parameters are approved, but how we achieve them is largely up to me and my crew. We're expected to use our judgment. Judgment, Dowen repeated, savoring both the word and the tea. In the hegemony, that word is almost a crime. To judge is to question, and to question is to rebel. Around the table, the senior crew members exchanged glances. They'd been piecing together a picture of this hegemony over days of conversations, and what they'd learned was deeply troubling. Tell us more about their expansion plans, asked Officer Lee, the tactical specialist. You mentioned mining operations? Dowan's scales darkened slightly, what the humans now recognized as his expression of concern. The hegemony consumes worlds. They strip planets of resources, use local species for labor until they're no longer needed, then move on. They've been doing this for centuries, expanding outward in all directions. He pointed to a star map displayed on the wall. Your Earth is here, yes? The hegemony approaches from this direction, perhaps 50 of your years before they reach your outermost colonies. The room fell silent. Humanity had only recently ventured beyond their solar system, establishing a handful of small research outposts on nearby habitable worlds. The thought of facing an expansionist empire with centuries of technological advancement was sobering. We're not ready for that kind of conflict, Captain Gina said quietly. No, you are not, Dowan agreed, his voice gentle but firm. But you have something the hegemony doesn't understand, something that might save you. What's that? Asked Dr. Hirk, freedom of thought. Dowan gestured around the table. In our discussions, I've heard 6 different opinions from 6 different humans. You debate, disagree, consider alternatives. In the hegemony, there is only one voice, the voice of the Council. One plan, one purpose, one permitted way of thinking. Park, who'd been quiet for most of the meeting, leaned forward. Is that why they cast you out? Because you thought differently? Dowan's head dipped in affirmation. I suggested that a native species on a mining planet might be intelligent and deserving of protection. For this heresy, I was sentenced to drift until my air ran out. Captain Gina stood up and walked to the viewport, gazing at the stars. We need to warn Earth. This changes everything. Our exploration priorities, defense strategies, diplomatic approaches. I've been thinking, Dowan said hesitantly. The hegemony's weakness is its rigidity. They expect all species to react in predictable ways, with either submission or conventional resistance. They're prepared for both. What they don't expect is creativity. Unpredictability. Officer Lee nodded slowly. Guerrilla tactics instead, of pitched battles, unexpected alliances. Precisely, Dowan replied, his scales brightening with excitement. And I know of worlds where resistance exists, small pockets of free thinkers who've escaped hegemony control. If Earth could reach them, form connections before the hegemony arrives. A network of allies, Gina finished the thought, turning back to the group with fresh determination in her eyes. We wouldn't face them alone. As the humans began discussing plans and possibilities, Dowan sat back, watching with wonder. In just weeks, these aliens had gone from complete ignorance of the hegemony to strategizing how to counter it. No committees seeking approval, no years of bureaucratic deliberation, just people sharing ideas, building on each other's thoughts. Later, alone in his quarters, Dowan stood before a mirror, studying his reflection. The hegemony had meant his punishment to be his end, a slow death in the emptiness of space. Instead, it had become a beginning, for humanity, a warning that might save them from subjugation. And for him, something he'd never imagined possible, a second chance at life with beings who valued him not for his rank or conformity, but for his mind and his difference. As the horizon altered course for Earth, carrying its precious cargo of information and hope, Dowan felt something new unfurling within him, something the hegemony had tried to extinguish long ago. They called it freedom.